we don't have any questions coming through at the chat at the moment. So so if we move on to the next round, which is our rum cask finish.
Absolutely, Caribbean rum cask. So this is the first release within the original cask finish series that I kind of briefly touched upon at the beginning of the session. So this was released back in April, on the 15th of April this year. And as I said, it was really the first within this series. So but the concept, again, is that we're aging the malt component of the original. So we're taking that malt component, and in this instance, we're aging it in ex-Caribbean rum casks. So now Bushmills has quite a long relationship with rum casks. I would say we've been using them for maybe 30 years or so at the distillery. So the thing is, we're always kind of experimenting. We're always, trialing different casks, different cask finishes, figuring out what works. But it was very much sought after, the rum cask finish. And so we went with it. We listened to the people, and it's gone down an absolute storm. So the Caribbean rum casks are sourced from the Dominican Republic. So they have held rum for 8 years before coming over to us at the distillery. And then similar to the original, it's minimum 5 years that we've aged it in the ex-Caribbean rum casks. So obviously the malt component is aged in the ex-Caribbean rum. The grain component here is still aged in ex-bourbon casks. So you still have that very slight bourbon influence, but it is really the rum and the rum kind of flavours and character that really shine through in this whiskey. So what the rum casks really bring is a tropical exotic note. So think along the lines of, when you kind of char a pineapple if you're having a barbecue, a kind of like those lovely pineapple mango notes. You even get a little hint of sort of coconut in there. And what I find with the rum cask that I especially love is the influence of the rum has really elongated the finish. So rather than a crisp, fresh finish with the original, the rum cask has really elongated that finish, and it's that beautiful drawn-out note of almost burnt sugar coming in there as well. So it's such a beautiful whiskey. It's even easier to drink, I would argue, than the original. So we'll see what you think of it. But it's been one that I have found myself reaching for more and more. I'm like you, Justine. Blackbush is my go-to whiskey. Always will be, but this has started to creep into my hand a little bit more often since it's been released, I have to admit. But it's a beauty, really is.
Great, we've got a couple of comments here. So Kane has said he's a huge fan of Bushmills, but has actually never really enjoyed the original blend. Okay, but then he's gone on to say he feels that these new cask finishes have just added that extra bit of complexity, and he's really enjoying them. So it's just about adding an extra 1 or 2 layers.
Absolutely, a little bit more depth. Absolutely, it kind of has, as we said, taken the original, the building blocks of that, and really just giving it a little twist, it's kind of a fresh perspective, if you like, on the original. So I couldn't agree more. Absolutely couldn't agree more with them. But
so let's take a sip, because otherwise people will be waiting for me to finish.
What are you picking up? What, nose-wise? Were you picking up anything different than me?
Again, I think there's quite a sort of biscuity, malty note, carrying on through the entire bit. I'm certainly getting the pineapple that you mentioned, but also I think like a sort of hint of fresh ginger as well, which I'm picking up.
Yep. That's a good point. This might work really nicely in a hot toddy. Haven't tried it in a hot toddy yet, but hot toddies are you always have the spices, the ginger or the cinnamon, so it might work really well in that.
Oh well, you've just got to try these things.
You do, don't you? It's a test for the weekend. Yes, I'm going to join you in a sip as well. Yeah. Again, you've got that wonderful oiliness, and definitely I'm getting the sort of fresh ginger coming through on the finish, and it lingers on the tip of your tongue. It's actually quite a much longer finish, isn't it, than the original? Hint of cloves, that sort of thing. But yeah, all those tropical fruits are definitely there. The pineapple. The coconut's really jumping out at me today in the palate. That's what I love about whiskey as well. As you say, depending on your surroundings and what you've eaten and things, like every time you go back to a whiskey, you can nearly experience a totally different it's like the first time you've tasted it sometimes as well, isn't it? So the coconut's really, really standing out for me today. But I just love, as I said earlier, I have a bit of a sweet tooth, so I love that kind of almost like burnt sugar finish coming through there.
I think you've probably said this. So it's been a long week. So if I haven't quite followed, excuse me. I'm not usually this dense.
Whiskey
So
down.
the single malt components have been matured in bourbon casks first of all, and then finished in rum casks, or entirely rum casks for the 5 year period.
So it's a little bit of both actually. So the malt component has either been aged 100% in rum, or it's been recasked from bourbon. So it's a little bit of both in there. So you're not wrong at all. There's a little bit of both. you're not quite tanked with whiskey just yet. So yeah, it's a little bit of both, and then the grain element is just aged completely in bourbon.
Okay.
So it's only bourbon, and it's the exact same for the next whiskey that we'll move on to. But we'll get into that obviously when we taste it. So either completely in rum or recast from bourbon. Yeah.
Okay. And so then the grain elements and the malt components are married together for any significant amount of time, or are they married at the bottling stage?
They're usually married maybe about a few days before bottling, and then they would go on from there as well. So that's quite common with a lot of Bushmills whiskies. Even the malts, our malts are 3 wood whiskies. Obviously they're completely 100% malted barley, but they are 3 different casks. So it is just about marrying those casks together. You do let the flavors kind of marry for a few days, and then they would go on to bottling from there as well.
Okay,
absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah. No, I think this is, we've had some wonderful warm weather. It's kind of changed a wee bit over the last few days, but during that glorious sunshine, this would be one definitely, you're in the park, got a little picnic, a cheeky dram. This is definitely...
Just in the hip flask, no one needs to know. Absolutely. No, it's, we released it at a perfect time, kind of, middle of April, as you were starting to get into the warmer weather and kind of come into that, when you do want a whiskey that is, a rum finish or a bourbon finish, a little bit sweeter, a little bit lighter. So absolutely perfect. We released this before the on-trade, so the bars and restaurants even opened as well. So it was, people were fighting over themselves to grab it in off licenses and independent off sales and things. So it was great.
Quick question for you here. Somebody in the Q&A has actually asked, are these releases limited or are they now permanent fixtures to the Bushmills lineup?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they are permanent additions. So they are permanent members of the Bushmills family, which is great. So, it's always great to see the kind of core family of whiskies being extended. So yeah, these are here to stay. Absolutely. So don't worry don't worry if you can't get your hands on one just yet. They're not going anywhere.
So a little comment in the chat from Jason, one of the organisers, one of the programme host for Belfast Whisky Week, said he thought drinking in Edinburgh parks was banned. Yes. So for Jason, if he's watching, Edinburgh is probably one of the only areas in Scotland where you are actually allowed to drink in a public place. It's all because of the bylaws that they made, because of the festivals. So it's all about the money. At the end of the day, it's all about the money. So yes, I won't get arrested if I'm drinking this Bushmills in a park.
Don't go to Botanic or Ormo. There's going to be an increase in flights to Edinburgh this weekend if people think good weather can drink in a park.